in my book, in the Fauci book, I talk about this event called Event 201, which was a pandemic simulation that took place in October 2019 in New York. And it was sponsored by Bill Gates, I think the World Economic Forum, by the Chinese CDC. George Gao was there. Mm-hmm. The social media companies were there. The pharmaceutical companies were there. The big corporate PR firms were there. And they were...
The current DNI was there.
Yeah, the current DNI, Avril Haines, who's the director of national intelligence, who's the top spy now in the world. And at that time, she was the former deputy director of the CIA. And Avril Haines made her bones at the CIA by covering up the Abu Ghraib and the Guantanamo Bay torture tapes, and covering up the illegal destruction of those tapes, and then covering up the illegal tapping of the United States Senate by the people who had destroyed those tapes, or who were trying to protect the people who destroyed those tapes. So she's like a impresario at cover-ups. She's President Biden's top spy. She was the former deputy director of the CIA, and she is at this simulation. What is the CIA doing in a pandemic simulation? They're not a public health agency. As I said, they're an agency that does coups d'etats. And if you look at what they did, that agency is simulating a global coronavirus pandemic that kills 60 million people, which is a lot more than the actual one did, which was 2 months later, which we learned about 2 months later. Although it was already circulating in October of 2019, we didn't know about it until January 2020. So what are they talking about? They're not talking about public health. They're not talking about how do we get vitamin D to everybody to build their immune systems? How do we keep them outside and healthy? How do we get people to lose weight? How do we quarantine the sick and yet, protect constitutional rights and protect the vulnerable and all of those kind of things that you would normally talk about? No. What they're talking about is using this pandemic as a pretext for clamping down totalitarian controls. And the first thing they said is we gotta limit free speech. We can't allow people to criticize government policies. And particularly, we cannot allow people to talk about a lab leak. They're doing this in October of 2019, before anybody of us have ever heard of Wuhan.